The Texas A&M Aggies try to get back on track on the road at number 19, Tennessee. Tennessee's a 3-point favorite. It's going to be on CBS. That'll be Saturday at 3:30 Eastern Time. Here's the most intriguing number of the game. By the numbers, Texas A&M, number one rushing defense in the SEC, giving up 84 yards a game. Tennessee, while we've long talked about their high-flying nature, that's not who they've been this year. They are the number one rushing offense in the SEC, 231 yards per game. A&M's defense, 84. Tennessee's offense, 231. Who wins in a battle of good versus good? Let's start with Tennessee's offense. Obviously, the three running backs are the stars of the show. Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, Dylan Sampson. They'll all split about 30 carries or so. Wright's kind of the violent guy, runs hard. I think Small is, a little bit, more consistent as far as how he finishes. And then Sampson is the home run hitter. They all benefit certainly from the scheme, but I think they're all actually very talented as well. And while Joe Milton, the starting quarterback, a lot of people assume that he'd just easily replicate the success that Hendon Hooker had, it hasn't quite been the case. They've kind of struggled to find consistency in the passing game, especially on the downfield throws. And when they're not using play action, it has not been very beneficial whatsoever. I do think they'll miss the size, strength, and reliability of Brew McCoy, so they'll rely a little bit more on Ramel Keaton, who at 6'3" can cover a lot of ground, getting vertical. Squirrel White is the speed guy there in the slot that does have great top-end speed, but can also do an amazing job of making you miss when he has the ball in his hands. The interesting game of cat and mouse in this one is that you clearly have a very good Tennessee offensive line that's playing, I think, pretty good football now that they are back to full strength after not being there for the better part of the first few weeks. But A&M's a group that has been trying to dictate defensively all season long. And really the last 3 weeks, if you look at how Texas A&M has kind of played, they're a little bit feast or famine. Like they're blitzing guys, they're overloading, like they're heating other teams up, man. And as a result, they have 61 pressures over the last 3 games. And they're blitzing, it feels like almost every time they drop back. But here's the problem. When you are a feast or famine approach, you're first in sacks in the SEC. That's great, but you're also 7th in passing plays allowed over 30 yards. So while they might be winning up front, they're putting what I think is a liability on islands in the back end. Now, this front for Texas A&M is legit. I mean, they are really good. They're big. They're physical. They have versatility. They have multiple guys that are 300-plus pounds that are still athletic enough to get home. You got the internal presence of McKinley Jackson. He's a big body dude that just eats up a lot of space. You have Shamar Turner on the edge, who is big, fast, has great burst, great bend. And then you have Walter Nolan, who's in there as well. All 3 of those guys can take over the game. So it's going to be very, very important to see whether or not Tennessee's offensive line can hold up against what I think is one of the more disruptive defensive lines in all of college football. Now, Tennessee's O-line, now that they've kind of moved some things around, Cooper Mays came back, referenced that one already, missed the first 4 weeks. That's certainly added a certain level of predictability there in the middle of that offensive line. Gerald Mincey played left tackle forever. They bring in a transfer. He switches over to right tackle, and now he's willing to play right tackle, and I think that's helped an awful lot. Well, he's going to have a tough assignment with Shamar Turner. Shamar Turner lines up almost all the time against the right tackle, and he's a handful. So it will be really interesting to see who wins that battle, the A&M defensive line or the Tennessee offensive line. Will Tennessee be able to effectively run the football? And if they can, will A&M be forced to bring extra guys into the box and maybe open themselves up to some big plays downfield? I'd roll the dice if I were A&M. Make Joe Milton prove that he can hit the throws down the field, because I'm not 100% convinced that he can. As far as Texas A&M Aggies offense is concerned, you felt like the run game was getting ready to go. I mean, ULM, Auburn, Arkansas, they were starting to take off. And then against Alabama, they all came crashing back to earth. Now, Le'Veon Moss is a violent runner. He can really wear people down. He's not going to be able to, he's not going to be a guy that you can bring down with one arm. Like, you're going to have to square him up and make sure that you get him down, which is really, really important, because if you can't, he's a guy that can get off in this game. You also have a couple other backs that will spell him in Reuben Owens and Amari Daniels, who hasn't been great against Power 5 opponents as he was early in the season. But the other thing, too, about Texas A&M's offense, the passing game is kind of difficult to predict right now. Max Johnson has talent, but he's been inconsistent. Oftentimes last week, he's thrown off his back foot and led to some serious issues for the Aggies. And then you look at the Volunteers on the other side. They have a fast, rangy edge presence with a bunch of pressures, a bunch of guys that can get home against an offensive line that has been really up and down. Keep an eye on Tyler Barron and James Pearson this one. Those are the edge rushers. They're both 6'5". They can both convert speed to power, but they also have, I think, some quickness up front that can be pretty problematic as well. They'll rotate a bunch of guys in there also, but something of note there, if for whatever reason A&M's having a difficult time in protection. The Aggies wide receivers have been a little banged up with Evan Stewart and Noah Thomas. Now, Stewart's obviously the downfield guy. Thomas is the long, rangy guy. So it's kind of been heavily put on the shoulders of Jake Johnson, the tight end, and Nia Smith, the slot player, who are both really, really good. Now, look at the trends in this game. Texas A&M, 0-6-1 against the spread, in which games where the line was between -3 and +3 since the start of the 21 season. A&M's 1-4 on the road against the spread since the start of last season, and Tennessee is 11-4 against the spread as a favorite since the start of last season. So everything is telling me to take A&M here, or everything's telling me to take Tennessee here. I'm going to follow the trends in this one. I think Tennessee gets it done. A&M is a tough spot for them. You have a lot that goes into the Bama game. They come up short in the matchup. I hope that it doesn't have a hangover effect. Obviously, Tennessee has Bama next week, so it could be a look-ahead spot for them, but they're coming off a bye. I would expect a focused Tennessee group that takes care of business at home against the Aggies.